Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another Photo Nation video. Hey, this channel is dedicated to photography and photography lovers. So if you're new to the channel, welcome to the nation. Hey, if you've been here before, welcome back to the nation. Hey, today we're going to talk about subject, it's flash. I get so many questions about, how do I incorporate flash into my ISOs, f-stops, and shutter speeds when I'm shooting? People tell me all the time, man, it is confusing when I add a flash because then everything started looking different. But once you know the concept, once you understand what it is, it's fairly easy. So we're going to go through it today, flash and the exposure triangle.
You are entering Photo Nation.
All right, first of all, what is the exposure triangle? So your exposure triangle are your ISOs, your shutter speeds, and your f-stops. So this is the exposure triangle. And so we're going to write them down on the board, and then I'm going to show you how to incorporate flash with it. So I just wanted to talk about some things. People ask, why do I need a flash when I have a built-in flash on my camera? Well, one of the reasons why you want to get a external flash, and here's an external flash. So this is my go-to SB800 flash. It's an external flash. And so one of the reasons you can use the pop-up flash in your camera. So you can only use this pop-up flash for it's only good for about 5 to 7 feet. After that, the inverse square law kicks in where light falls off farther you are away from your subject. So it's okay to use it if you're, within 5 feet, but it is just not something that I would use. So I always get what's called an external flash. And so here's your external flash. And so the external flash just actually pops onto your camera like this. And this is just an extra diffuser cap that's on it. So I'm going to take it out. You have so many options. The diffuser cap knock your light down by one stop. Then you also have on the inside here, you have another diffuser right here. Then you have what's called a bounce card. So if I didn't want to shoot direct flash on the person for harsh light, I normally put this diffuser down and I put the card up, and this is actually how I'm shooting. Pretty much like that. And so it's just going to give you a better, more light. I mean, it's pretty good. I can do pretty good at 15 feet, which is pretty good. It has a really good guide number. We'll talk about the guide numbers in a second. But here's one of the things that most photographers do that I see, even if they get an external flash. What they do is the flash is like this, and it's good because now it's over the axis of the lens. So it's pretty good. But once you turn it to the side to get a vertical shot, now your flash is not over the axis of the lens. And that's where you start getting red eye and shadows behind your subject. So this is not a proper way to do it. If you're horizontally, you're okay. If you're vertical, it's not okay. So a lot of, the new photographers will come in and say, oh, well, I thought this was portrait and this was landscape. Well, I mean, whatever you want to call it, but I've always said horizontal and vertical. But you never want your flash to be here. You always want your flash to stay on top. So how would you take a picture like that? Well, I'll show you. So we're going to take this off. And I have what's called camera flip bracket. So what it does, my camera goes here, my flash goes here, and I'll show you how that works. All right, so here's the bracket in action, and it's called a camera flip because you can actually flip the camera and the flash stays in the proper place above the axis of the lens. So if I'm doing vertical shots or if I'm doing horizontal shots, vertical shots or horizontal shots. So it doesn't matter, vertical shots or horizontal shots. So this is my wedding setup. This is what I use. It has a quick release for my tripod. So all I have to do is hit a button and then I can take it with me and I can just go back and sit it back on the tripod and I'm good to go. So basically, just a great, and I always tell people, don't use the pop-up flash. Go ahead and if you're gonna be serious about this, go ahead and buy your bracket. And I don't know the name of it. It's just called, it's a camera flip bracket. They have all type of brackets. They have where the flash flips. And I really don't like the flash flip, but I mean, I see a lot of photographers using it where the camera stays here, but the flash actually flips. But I like this one because I can just flip the camera. So what happens is you have this cord right there, and it sits on top of the bracket. Let's take this off so you can see. It's just mounted. This end is mounted to the bracket, and then it goes into the hot shoe here on the camera, and that makes the camera and the flash communicate. SB800 flash, the Nikon D750 camera. The cord is a Nikon SC17 that makes it work. So you just have to get the proper connections. If you're using Canon or Sony or whatever, you can always just get the cord that matches your flash. And so this is just a great way of doing it. I love it because all I have to do is just flip the camera. All right, so I think if you're going to be serious and you're going to be out photographing events, get that camera flip bracket. I mean, it eliminates shadows. It eliminates red eye. I rarely get red eye when the flash is in its proper position where it should be. So I love it. I wouldn't do a shoot every time I have to use a flash. I wouldn't do a shoot without it. So I love it. So I recommend a camera flip bracket if you're going to use flash. All right, so we're going to talk about flash and the exposure triangle and how that works. So we said that the exposure triangle is made up of your f-stops, your shutter speeds, and your ISOs, right? All right, so let's write them on the board and see how they work, and just do a couple of scenarios and see how everything works together. So let's start off with flash. And so on most flashes, like on my SB800, the setting that I use, it allows me to put it on manual, and it actually shows me the f-stops in there. So let's just say it's 2.8, f4, 5.6, 8, 11, and 16. Now this is flash. These are your flash output numbers. All right, so let's add the f-stops on it. So you're gonna have 2.8, 4, 5.6, 8, 11, and 16. All right, so what's next? So we have the flash. We have one of the members of the trio from the exposure triangle. All right, so I like to call it, it's well known worldwide as exposure triangle, but I like to call it a trio because your ISOs, f-stops, and shutter speeds all work together as a trio. So what's next? We have flash, we have our f-stops, we have our shutter speeds. And so your shutter speeds, it's pretty much the same. We're going to go 500, 250, 125, 60, and a 30. Now there's more to offer in all three of them. I just ran out of room. I mean, because depending on the camera manufacturers of the lens, your f-stops can come lower down to like 1.4, and they can go higher to f22, f32. Your shutter speeds has a wide range of numbers. I mean, they can go, I'm at a 30th of a second. I'm at, it's a 60th of a second, a 30th of a second, down to a half a second, 1 second, all the way through to 30 seconds. And then you have the bulb where you just hold your shutter down and it allows light to come in. So I just don't have enough room on the board to write it. And so then we have our ISOs. And I'm going to start at 100, 200, 400, 800. Now, these three are make up your exposure triangle. So how does flash put in? So before we do that, let's go into a scenario. And let's say for this scenario, we're at, I don't know, 5.6, 1/25th of a second is our working f-stop that we determine is a proper exposure. And let's say 100. And so how would you determine how to get that? So one of the ways I've always told people to do is to get your camera and put it on program. Put it on program. You walk up on the scene. You don't know, what f-stop, what shutter speeds you want to use. So put it on program, press it down halfway, and it's going to give you a reading. It's going to give you a ISO, f-stops, and shutter speed reading. So basically what you do is you could take a picture if you like, take a picture so you have something to compare with, and then put your camera back on manual, put it on those settings. Let's say on program it gave me 100 ISO, 1/25th of a second on my shutter speeds, and my f-stops, it gave me a 5.6 to say that was a correct exposure for the light on the scene at that time. So I put my camera back on manual, I put it back on 100, 1/25th, and 5.6, and I take a picture. Now, because you're on manual, now you have the leeway to change anything you want to change. You can use equivalent exposure to change that. And I'll just briefly go over that. I have a really good video on equivalent exposure. It's called How to Be the Boss of Your Camera. And I also have another video that I sit down and really explain what equivalent exposure is and how it works. So make sure you check out those videos. But so basically how equivalent exposure works, if I was at 5.6 and I wanted to go to f8, I would be letting in one stop less light. So you can get a better graphic of this. So 2.8 is the smaller f number, but it's a larger aperture. And then it gets smaller, and then it gets smaller. And we want to make sure this is actually a little larger. So the smaller the number, the larger the opening and the aperture. The larger the number, the smaller the aperture, the less light it receives. So on your shutter speeds, the larger the number, the less light it receives. And as you get here, it's more light. And here, it's even more light. All right, with me? So on the ISOs, here it's going to be less light, more light, and even more light. So here your camera, if you're in the bright sun, you need a less sensitive ISO, so you receive less light. And as you go into a low light situation and you have to go 400, 800, 1600, 3200, then your camera is going to get brighter, but it's going to introduce grain. It's going to mess with your image quality. So, a lot of people say, well, hey, man, if I can do that and get more light at 800, 600, 3200, why not use it because of image quality? you want to stay down here where you can get the sharpest image quality as possible. So one of the things I do when I walk on the scene is the very first thing I do is I decide, what ISO I want. That's the very first thing based on the light on the scene. All right, so you have these, and this is your exposure triangle or your trio: f-stops, shutter speeds, and ISO. Now you say, where flash come in? Well, we're going to definitely get to that. So let's talk about this. So when there's no flash, all you're using is ISOs, f-stops, and shutter speeds, which are the exposure triangle or trio. When there's no flash, they all work together. You can't have one without the other. There's no way possible. Now, once you know the rules, you can break the rules. You don't have to use equivalent exposure. A lot of times, I'll change it. I'll just change it however I want to change it. So let's do this. So let's say this was our working number. Program told us 5/6 f-stop, 1/25 of a second shutter speed, and 100 ISO, right? We put it back on manual, and we take another picture, and it looks pretty much the same. Or one may look a little better than the other. You're probably going to get the same density because you're on program, now you're on manual, you're using the exact same settings. So you're going to get the same density. It should look pretty much the same. And if you were to photograph the entire event in program, these would change based on the light. If you go higher and get more light, lower and get less light, you turn and get less light over here. So it would just change. It would just be all across the board. You would have no consistency. That's my problem with program, is that you just don't have any consistency. But on manual, you can be consistent. So it's on manual, 5/6, 1/25, 100. And now, let's say you decide you want, and we're talking about using equivalent exposure. So you decide you wanted a sharper depth of field, which means you want, your foreground, middle ground, and background to be sharper. Well, 5/6 is kind of that middle ground. So let's say you went one stop to f8. So so what you just did, you went from a larger opening to a smaller opening. So you just halving the amount of light. And just to let you know, if you were going from f8 to 5/6, from a smaller opening to a larger opening, you would be doubling the amount of light. So it would be twice as bright. But let's say you was going to f8. So you went to f8, you closed down. That's one of those terms, close down. Close down means you let in less light, but now your depth of field is going to be sharper because that's the only thing going to change. So when you went from 5/6 to f8, you've just changed the depth of field. It's going to be a little more sharper, a little more crisper, foreground, middle ground, and background. But when you're using equivalent exposure, if you close down one, you have to open up on one of these. It works like a seesaw. So you close down by one stop, you went to f8, and if you were here, you have to open up by one stop. So this is getting less light, this is getting more light. So if you're at f8 and you're at 125, our initial working, so now you have to open up by one stop. Right? And you could actually do the same thing here, but usually once I set the ISO, unless the light has changed drastically, I won't touch the ISOs. So I'm going to take the ISOs off the table just right now. So we're going to just keep that 100 ISO here, because that's our working ISO. And we're just going to concentrate on how they all work together as the exposure triangle and how equivalent exposure work. But normally, once I set it, it's set unless the light changes. All right, so now you're at 5.6 to 1/25th, 100, but you decided you wanted sharper depth of field. So you're on manual, you were able to change it to 8. Now you could leave it from f8, you could stay at 1/25th if you like that picture. But if you're doing true equivalent exposure, you would go from f8, you close down 1 on your f-stop, so you have to open up 1 on your shutter. So that would give you the same density. Only thing would change is now your depth of field. So let's do it the opposite way. Okay, so let's just decide we wanted something different. Let's decide instead of wanting sharper depth of field, you bought that expensive lens and you want to use 2.8 or f4. Let's decide you want to use f4. Because usually the sweet spot on the lens is not the last f-stop number, it's the one before. So let's say f4. So let's say you want to use f4. Remember, your working f-stop was 5.6. Your working shutter speed was 1/25th at 100 that you got from program. You put it on manual, you change it, but you decide, okay, I like the picture. It looks like a proper exposure, but I want to get a shallow depth of field or the background to go out of focus for whatever reason. So you can do that. You're on manual, so you change it to f4. So now you're at 5.6, and here you went to 1 stop to f4. So did you open up or close down? You went from 5.6 to f4. You opened up and let in more light by 1 stop. So normally what you would do is close down. If you open up 1, you close down on the other. You're at 1/25th of a second. So you need 1 stop less light on your shutter speed. You have 1 stop more light on the f-stop. So which way would you go to get 1 stop less light? Would you go to 60th of a second? Or would you go to 2/50th of a second? You got it. 2/50th of a second. So now your working f-stop is, remember, we're not using the flash. We're just talking ISO, f-stop, and shutter speeds. No flash. And then we're just going to put the flash in a second. And so your working is 5.6, 1/25th. Well, now you're at, so now you're at f4, 2/50th of a second at 100 ISO. So now the picture is still going to be a correct exposure. So what's changed? The only thing you've changed now is now your background is a little more blurrier, right? Which is pretty cool. So that's how equivalent exposure. All right, now what we're going to do is incorporate flash there. We're going to stick with our original 5.6, 1/25th at 100 ISO. So I'm going to take this off and take this off. All right, so now how do we do? So now you feel for whatever reason that you need flash. So you pop your flash on. Now most flashes have what's called a sync speed, usually about either 1/25th of a second or 2/50th of a second. And what that means once you turn your flash on, you're limited on your shutter speeds. It doesn't affect your f-stops, but it will affect your shutter speeds, because when it was just f-stops, shutter speeds, and ISO, you could change that shutter speed to whatever you wanted. But once you pop that flash on, it has a sync speed of either 1/25th of a second or 2/50th of a second, depending on the flash. This particular flash, the SB800, it has a sync speed of 250th of a second. That means, I can use the flash up with a shutter speed of, 250th of a second. So if I was at 1/25th, I could use 250. Once I try to go to 500, it's not going to work. I'm not going to get a picture. You'll probably get half of a picture. So once you turn that flash on, you have to remember your sync speed. The only way you can beat that is to have a flash that has what's called high speed sync. And so, like my AD200 Pro, it has high speed sync when I'm out on location. But we're just talking about flash on the camera, not studio lights right now. So let's stick with that. So once you do that, then you're pretty much limited. But that's okay. You can add some flash in. So now let's look at flash. So to understand flash, let's look at it like this. Let's go over f-stops quickly here. So 2.8, small number, larger opening. And I like to make that a lot larger so you can see that it is a large opening. So it's let's just say a large opening. And as you go up to the larger numbers, like F16, 11, 16, 22, 32, is larger numbers, smaller aperture, less light. 2.8, smaller number, larger aperture, it lets in more light. All right, so let's look at the flash. Now, on the flash, it's going to be like this. So we're going to go here. We're going to get bigger. And then we're going to get bigger. So this is just one of the ways I just want. There's more technical ways that I could explain it to you, but I found out teaching over 15 years at the college, this is just one of the easiest ways to explain it. So if you're wide open at 2.8 on your camera or your f-stops, you're wide open. That means you're letting in a lot of light. If you're letting a lot of light in on your f-stops, you don't need a lot of light on your flash. So if you're at 2.8 on the camera, 2.8 on the flash, it's almost like a one-to-one output reading. So it's almost like a one-to-one output reading. So 2.8 and 2.8. Now, let's say you're at 5.6 in red, and you wanted your flash to be one stop brighter. You're at 5.6. You want your flash to be one stop brighter. Now, if you did this, if you just went here, f-stop is at 2.8, flash at 2.8. That's like kind of like shooting on TTL. It's even light. F4, F4, 5, 6, 5, 6, 8, 8, 11, 11, 16, 16. So that's okay. So, but once you decide, okay, I want the flash to be my main light. I want more flash than the ambient light that's on the scene. And let's say you're at 5.6. You want your flash one step brighter. Which way would you go? Well, I put these numbers here so you can just get a visual without a whole lot of explaining, just to get a visual. You should be able to see that 2.8 on your flash, and this is if you're shooting your flash manually, which I do. Of course, it takes more battery, more power, but I can get a more accurate exposure and I have more control. So I just carry more batteries, or I have a little small battery pack that plugs into it. So no big deal. So you're at 5.6. You want your flash to be even. That's easy. That's like shooting TTL. You're at F8. Put your flash on F8. You're going to get even light. So that's easy. But if you're at 5.6, you wanted your flash to be one stop brighter was the question. Which way would you go on your flash? You're at 5.6. You wanted to be one stop brighter. I'll give you a second. And this is where everybody gets confused and say, well, man, I don't use a flash because once I put a flash on there, everything changes. Well, it really doesn't if you understand how they work. If you understand how the exposure triangle works or the exposure trio, and you understand how flash work. So let's get it. if you were at 5.6, for whatever reason, you wanted your flash to be one stop brighter, would you go to f4? No, because it would be less. So you would go to f8. So if you're at 5.6, you put your flash on f8, your flash would be one stop brighter. Now, this is totally different. So where 2.8 is a larger opening on f-stops, 2.8 lets in less light on your flash. So all you have to do is in your mind, switch it around. So here it goes like it's supposed, like we think it's supposed to in our mind. That's not, when we're not talking fractions. Small number, small opening, large number, large opening. That's on flash. It's opposite on f-stops. Small number, large opening, large number, small opening. So once you get over that mental block, you're okay. So what did we say here? You're at 5.6. You wanted your flash to be one stop brighter, right? You put your flash on f8. It would be one stop brighter. All right. So let's say you wanted your flash. Of course, if even, you would just put it on 5.6 and it would be even. But let's say you wanted to use what's called field flash, which means you just want to fill in the shadows created by the sun or the ambient light that's on the scene, and you don't want a lot of flash, because usually the mistake most people make is they put too much flash on it, and now it looks like it's a flash. It would probably have been a lot nicer picture without using the flash at all. But when people put flash in, they just put absolutely too much flash. And the whole key to flash is you want to make it look like you're not using flash. So if you use it the proper way, you could. So now for this scenario, we're at 5.6. I'm going to change the scenario. You say, well, we're tired of 5.6. Okay, let's get out of 5.6 and let's get out of 125. So now our new working f-stop is going to be f8. That's our new working f-stop. We can stay at 100 ISO, but if you wanted to change that, just for giggles, man, can you use a different ISO? Sure, why not? So let's say we want to use, so let's say our ISO is now, it's getting later, 400. Well, that doesn't change anything. That doesn't change. It's still the exposure trio. They still work the same. You've just incorporated a flash. And so let's do the exact same scenario. If you wanted your flash to be one stop brighter, where would you go? So you go to F11. Your flash would go to F11. Your camera would be at F8. Your flash would be one stop brighter. Now, trust me, just get the concept. If you get the concept down, and we can talk the technical stuff all day long, but that was one of the things when I was coming up as a young photographer. I mean, I would go to seminars and workshops and talk to people, and they would talk so big and so high above your head that you couldn't understand it. Once I caught on and once I got it, I said, you know what? It could be explained better. I wrote 2 books, one called Exposure Made Easy and for the everyday shooting, and the other book is The Studio, Mastering Light. But I tried to explain everything as simple as possible because they made it too hard. I mean, like breaking my brain, going to workshops, doing this, doing that, trying to understand the terminology and what they were talking about. And they never would explain it. They would just say, oh, well, it's too dark. You need to open up. Well, if it's too dark and I'm at F8, do I open up at 11 or do I open up at 5.6? Well, open up means go to more light. So if I'm at F8, I go to 5.6, I've just opened up. If I went to 4 or 2.8, it may be too bright and I've the term overexposed. Or just if they say, well, you need to close down, well, then that means less light. So if I was at 8 and I went to 16, I'm 2 stops less light. That's probably too dark now. And now I'm just underexposed. But I just want to make it simple, just so you can understand it. All right, let's do another scenario. Let's take that up. We're going to stay with the working f-stop of f8. Now, here's your flash. You want to make sure. So your working f-stop is f8. And let's say you just wanted just enough flash where you don't know that it's there, but you want to fill in some of those shadows. So you don't want a lot of light. You don't want it even. So if you wanted it even, it would be your camera's on f8. You just put your flash on f8. You would pretty much get even light. But if you wanted one stop less, where would you go? So here, you go to 5.6, and now you would have one stop less light. If you went from f8, and if it's still too bright, and you go to f4, and it would be 2 times. So now you would go 1 f-stop, 2 f-stops. So you would get even less light. So remember down here, the smaller the number, the less light it receives. So if you have a lot of light at 2.8 on your f-stop, you don't need a lot of light on your flash. Let's start with 11. So let's say now your new working f-stop is 11. So your new working f-stop is f11. So now you're at f11 on your f-stops, and you needed 1 stop more light. You tell me, which way would you go? Would you go to f16 to get 1 stop more light on the flash, or would you go to f11? So you need 1 stop more light. You would go to f16 and you would get 1 stop more light out of the flash. So flash is just not that difficult. It's just understanding the output of the flash. Now we could talk about guide numbers and different things like that. Okay, there's one more thing we need to talk about. I think you got this down. We beat it to death. So, and it's all about repetition. You just do it over and over and over. Now we found out how the flash and the f-stop work together. One thing is missing up there. You know about the ISOs. We're just going to keep that general. Based on the lighting situation, that's where the ISO is going to stay. There's one more element we need to add, and that will be your shutter speeds. So let's put that up there, and I want to show you how the flash and the shutter speeds react to each other. So it's the shutter speeds. And so we can still do 500, 250, 125, 60, and 30. Okay? So now your ISOs, your shutter speeds, and your f-stops all work together to create a proper exposure. So we know that if there's no flash involved, then your ISOs, your f-stops, and shutter speeds, they all work together. They're a trio. That's why it's the exposure trio, and that's basically the f-stops, the shutter speeds, and your ISO. Once the flash is involved and you turn that flash on, this is what happens. Now the flash and the f-stops work together. Your flash and your f-stops team up and work together. Once you turn that flash on, now shutter speed is kind of left behind, and I'll explain that in a second. So your flash and your f-stops now work together as a team to expose your subject, right? So if you were at f8 on your on your f-stops, and you needed 1 stop more light, you would open up to 5.6, and that would give you 1 stop more light. Or you could stay at f8, remember, and open up the one stop more light to a 60th. Now, so you can do that. We understand that. We understand that's the equivalent exposure, correct? So now, once you turn that flash on again, now your shutter speed is left behind. It no longer works as the exposure triangle anymore because it works alone now. Because if you like the lighting on your subject with your flash and your f-stops, and let's just say this is your working f-stops, but your background is too bright. So would you change your flash settings or would you change your f-stop settings? No, you would change your shutter speeds because remember now, once you turn the flash on, now your flash and your f-stop team up to work together to expose your subject. It's critical now. Your flash and your f-stop now is controlling the light on your subject based on the flash output and your f-stop. Now your shutter speed now is standing alone. It's working by itself. It's not a trio anymore. It's actually working by itself. Now, if you look at the whole picture, everything is working together. But in this scenario, the flash and the f-stop is exposing your subject, and the shutter is exposing your background or the ambient light around in the background. We just call it background. So if you were flash output 8, f8 on your camera, your f-stop, and your shutter speed is 1/25th, and let's say the background was too bright. It was just totally too bright. So your shutter speed controls that. So now you could actually go from 125 to 250, and that would darken it down. And that's all if your flash is able to sync at 1/250th of a second. If it stops at 1/25th of a second, then you're going to have to deal with what's there. But you would change that. So I'm trying to make a scenario. Let's forget about this. Let's say we're shooting in high speed sync or something. And so we can actually go the opposite way too. So let's do this. Let's say the background, you're using your f8 flash output, f8 on your f-stops, 1/25th on your shutter speed, and let's say it was too bright, the background. Because remember, the f-stops and the flash expose the subject. Now your shutter speed stands alone and it exposed the ambient light around, or what we were going to call the background. So let's say if it was, the background was just too dark and you needed to add more light. So the only way to do that, now you could change your ISOs, and that'll put more light on the scene. But like I said, I prefer not to do that. I want to keep my image quality as. So the only thing you can do now, if the background was too dark, you can go to a 60th of a second, right? I mean, you could even go 2 stops to a 30th of a second. But right here, you hand holding, you don't want to drop below that unless you're on a tripod. Now, if you really want to do it, especially at night photography, I mean, it would be great. That shutter speed could drop down to as many stops as you want, as long as you're on a tripod. So anyway, this is what I want you to remember. It's critical because people like if the background is too dark, but the subject looks good, and then you start changing flash output, you start changing f-stops, you start changing ISOs, and you don't think about the shutter speed, and you may even start changing the shutter speeds. But if you could just remember one thing, once you turn the flash on, the flash and the f-stop teams up, work together to expose your subject. Now your shutter speed exposes the rest of the scenery, the background. the ambient light from the background. So if you can just remember that, once you turn that flash on, the flash and the f-stops now team up, work together, and the shutter speed exposes your background. All right, so just to recap, before I close it out here, when there's no flash, then your f-stops, your shutter speeds, and your ISOs work together as a trio, and you have your exposure triangle or your exposure trio, your f-stops, your shutter speeds, and ISOs. So if you change one, you have to change the other. You let in one stop more light on one, you have to close down one stop less light on the other. If you open up 3 stops on one, you have to close down 3 stops on the other. Now, that's just a rule of thumb, and that's the equivalent exposure. Now, you don't have to do that, because once you understand the rules, then you could break the rules. A lot of times I'll use equivalent exposure. A lot of times I won't. It just depends on the scene and what I'm looking for at the time. I'll use equivalent exposure. I'll open up, if I'm at F8, I'll open up 2 here. Then that means I really should close down 2 here, but I might close down 1. I may not close down at all. I may just want to change that. So now you've changed the density of the picture, but once you know the rules, you could break the rules. That's the best thing about knowing them. So just remember the exposure trio are your f-stops, your shutter speeds, and your ISO. They all work together to get the correct exposure. But once you add in the flash, then the game changes. So once you add in the flash, once you add that flash in, now it's your flash and your f-stop that works as a team. I know could be really confusing, all of these numbers up here. That's why I broke it down and did it one at a time. And that's how you have to practice it one at a time. So go out there and practice, and it'll become second nature to you. So that's all it is with flash. Electronic flashes today are pretty easy. A lot of them shoot on TTL, which I rarely shoot TTL for almost anything. I'm usually manual all the way down the road. But I remember back in the day when I came out, when I was photographing 30 plus years ago, flash was a little more complicated. So let's look at that. All right, so just to give you a scenario from back in the day, the flashes was not electronic. I mean, they were full power flashes. And so it only had pretty much one setting. You had to understand how to set your f-stops according to the flash out of the flash. All right, so let's just look at the guide numbers. So I'm still talking about the flashes of old. Okay, so because back in the day, we didn't have all of the electronic stuff. We had to know how to figure things out. And the way we would pretty much buy a flash is by the guide number, the GN number. So the guide number would determine the power output of the flash. So if your guide number, for example, had a reading of 160, that's the power output of the flash. Your subject was at 10 feet, you would have to divide that into your guide number, divide it, and that will give you your working f-stop. So who's really fast? 10 divided by 60 is what? It'll be an f16. So then that's what we would have to go by, what guide number it was. So let's take a look at it just quickly here. So this is how we would normally do it. All right, so back in the day, the flashes was full power. So you had to understand the guide number. And so the flash, it shot full power every time. So what you would have to do is understand that guide number. And one of the things I used to do is take a tape measure and measure out 5 feet, 10 feet, and 15 feet, and fire the flash at 5 feet, see what f-stop I would get at 10 feet and at 15 feet. So this is how I would do it. Your subject was at 5 feet, 10 feet, and 15 feet. So you would have to know how much power output and what f-stop you would get based on the distance. So I knew on the flash, I think it was called the Lumidyne flash, it was totally, 100%, you just turn it on. There was no other settings. It was on and off. At 5 feet, I knew I was at, because I did the flash test, I knew while I'm focusing, that's another thing. You didn't have you didn't have automatic focus. You had to actually manually focus it, everything. So I know as a bride coming down the aisle, and if she gets to 5 feet within me, I know I have to be at f16. She was so close, so you needed less light. So at 10 feet, she was a little farther away, so I could have a little more light. And then if they were 15 feet away, I would have to focus, look down to see the distance. I mean, we had to do all of this. So photography is so easy today. So it's not good or bad. Everything evolves. So at 15 feet, what do you think? If I was at 5 feet at f16, 10 feet at f8, so what f-stop you think I would be at 15 feet? Where I would be at f 5.6. So I knew as my subject was getting closer to me, if they were farther away, I needed more light. And this is we're talking on the flash now. We're talking flash because the flash would shoot full power. There was no other settings but on and off. So I had to know how much light that flash was putting out at 5 feet, 10 feet, 15 feet, and beyond. So, and I can remember just as good because as they're coming down with the older cameras, you would have to actually focus it. And it actually had the distance on the focusing ring, on the lens. Your f-stop was on the lens, your shutter speed was on the lens, and the distance was also on the lens. So you had to quickly, all at one time, with one mind, with one action almost, focus it, see what feet you were at. If I were at 5 feet, quickly put it at f16, click, take a picture. If they were coming down and I would focus it, see it was at 10 feet, I would have to quickly change my f-stops, to f8. I mean, it seems like it was a lot looking back at it, but once you've done it 1,000 times, it's just second nature. You don't have to think about it. I didn't have to look at the feet anymore. I just knew if they were about 5 feet, f16, about 10 feet, f8 would do the job. At 15 feet, I know I have to be at least at 5.6. So you don't have to do that anymore. The flash pretty much does everything for you. So let's just recap the flash. I still call this the good old days. I mean, I enjoyed doing everything manually. I just enjoyed it. You just had to be there. All right, so let's just do a quick review. So let's do flash, and we would do 2.8, 5.6, 8, 11, 16. Because I'm reminiscing on the good old days, I don't want you to forget what we just talked about. So we're just going to do a quick review. So let's go f-stops. And same is going to be f2.8, f5.6, f8, f11, f16. So let's just say for whatever reason you wanted sharp depth of field and the correct exposure for, whatever that scene was you're at was f11. So you turned your flash on, and let's say you just needed just even light. If you wanted even light, then all you would do is on f11. Now, there are so many flashes out there, and there's TTL, ITTL. I mean, you can shoot the way you want, but I'm just showing you an easy way. I think it's easier where you can have more control. Of course, that's all I talk about is taking control of your camera and being the boss of your camera. So on manual, on your flash and manual on your shutter, you take control. You have total control. Does it work the other ways? Of course it does. This is just the way I prefer to do it. And an easier way for you to understand it or to explain it. So if I'm at F11 and I want even light, I just put that baby on F11 and it should be pretty good. It would be just like shooting on TTL, which I never do. So because I'm shooting manually, I have total control. So let's just say you wanted the flash to be one stop brighter. Where would you go? So I'm going to actually put the circles back on it. So remember, F16 gives you the least amount of light, and 2.8 is going to give you the maximum amount of light, right? So remember on flash, it's actually opposite. Now you're getting the least amount of light and more light. So if you just think about it like that, so if you have, for example, a 2.8 large opening, you don't need a lot of flash. On the other hand, if you were at F16 or our working f-stop, F11, if you pick F11 on a flash, that's just even light. If you want it one stop brighter, if you need it one stop brighter, you go to F16. So F11, F16 will give you one stop brighter on your flash. But, so let's say you wanted to do the opposite. So you're getting the pattern, you're seeing the pattern here. So if you're at F11 and you needed one stop less, then you come here. And I know it can get really confusing because, a lot of my students would say, hey, I just learned, got over that brain freeze of 2.8, smaller number, more light. Now you're telling me that it's opposite with the flash. That's just the way it is. I didn't make it up. That's just the way it is. So did we do that scenario? So if you're at F11, you need one stop less light, you go to F8. So if you're at F11, you need one stop less light, you would put your flash on F8, that will give you one stop less light. So you can always go as far as you want. If you still think it's too bright, you're at F11, you can go to 5.6. Yeah, I almost missed it there. Go to 5.6. Now, do you have to do this? I mean, there's always other ways of doing things. You have what's called light fall off. So if you're at F11, you needed less light, you just back up more. Use your feet, just back up more. If you needed it brighter, just walk in closer, and then the light will be brighter without changing anything. So I just wanted to recap and go over it. So flash is not that hard if you look at it like this. If now that you know that 2.8 is going to give you the least amount of light because you have a lot of light on your f-stop here. 16 is going to give you more light because F16 on your f-stop is a small amount of light, so you need more light on the flash. All right, guys, so that's going to end it for today. I think I've given you enough to think about. So just go out and practice. You're more enlightened now. You have a better understanding on how flash works. So all you can do now is just go out and practice it. Get your flash, turn your flash on, put it on manual. Now, if you're shooting TTL, it's a no-brainer. You don't even have to think. You may not get as consistent, but this way you can have total control. So anyway, we're going to wrap it up for today. Hopefully this was helpful for you. And if you like this content, make sure you like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of our videos. And hey, make sure you shoot your shot your way. Later. Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another Photo Nation video. Hey, thanks for watching to the end. Hey, I know flashes can be confusing, but if you have a formula, it could be easy. So grab your camera and your flash, go out and practice, and you'll get better and better and better at it until you have it down. And if you like this type of content, please hit that like and subscribe button and say in the contents, I subscribe. Hey, and I'm giving away a few copies of my book, Exposure Made Easy, and you can see the details in the description. And while you're there, make sure you get that free gift, our free off-camera lighting ebook. Go get it, use it, and I'll see you in the next video.